Welcome to Sustainable in the City, where Nashville sustainability champions take the spotlight. Join Urban Green Lab and the Nashville Department of Waste Services as we dive deep into the stories of everyday Nashvillians. We'll chat with your neighbors, coworkers, and fellow community members about the small sustainable actions that are making a big impact on Nashville. From reducing waste to planting trees, our guests will share their stories about the benefits, barriers, and motivators behind everyday choices. Tune in and be inspired by the power of individual action. This is Sustainable in the City.
Hey there, and welcome to Sustainable in the City. My name is Allie Omens. I'm with the Nashville Department of Waste Services. We are a department of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. We educate and provide outreach to residents across Nashville to learn how to reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, and properly dispose of their waste.
And I am Karissa Hampton, the Sustainable Households Manager with Urban Green Lab. We are a Nashville-based nonprofit that teaches communities to live sustainably. Last episode was Cycle in the City, and we had Al Maddox with us. They suggested using the bike layer on Google Maps. Was there anything that you tried or anything different since the last episode?
Yeah, I'll say, unfortunately, Al, if you're listening, I did not use the bike layer on Google Maps since your episode, but I am still thinking about it. I am still staring at that bike that's sitting in my laundry room and trying to find the motivation, and I'm still thinking about that. But the way that I wanted to take the tip from last time was, instead of biking, using the bus. I rode the bus for the first time here in Nashville. I've been on buses in other cities, but for some reason, I just never hopped aboard a WeGo bus. And I took the bus from the Elizabeth Duff Transit Center in downtown to the new Dr. Ernest Rip Padden Jr. North Nashville Transit Station, or Transit Center. And I had a really lovely time. The bus, both of the centers, the WeGo centers, made it so easy to figure out when the bus was coming, and it felt very easy to navigate. I was very impressed, and it's just nice, like using the bike layer on Google Maps. It's just that first time of doing something that can feel really difficult. Now I've been on the bus in Nashville, and the next time I do it, I'm going to know how to better navigate it. So if you haven't been on a WeGo bus, go out there and try riding the bus in Nashville.
Awesome. So while I don't personally have a bike, my children have old bikes that they've outgrown, and so recently we added it to a community drop-off.
Awesome. And if you haven't listened to our last episode, be sure to check that out. We, as Karissa said, spoke with our guest Al about cycling in Nashville and repairing our bikes to help use them longer. Today, we're talking about creative ways to reduce waste in the kitchen and learning how to make food that both tastes really good and is good for the planet.
Yeah, so today we're excited to welcome Mariah Ragland. She is a plant-based soul food chef and founder of Radical Rabbit. Mariah's passion for zero-waste cooking and sustainable food practices brings a really fresh inspiration. So Mariah, can you tell us a little bit about your sustainability journey?
Yes. Hey, y'all. So, as she said, I'm with Radical Rabbit. We've been in business since 2018, and I'm really glad to still be in business in Nashville. I have been a chef, but I've always had a passion for cooking food and also the environment, and I've had a passion for doing the right thing. So all of that mixed into who I am today and how I run my business. So I'm really glad to be here and talk more about that.
Yeah. And so how did you get here in Nashville?
Oh, well, long time ago, 2012, I came here to attend Fisk University. I was there and I graduated in 2016. I started working at a food justice nonprofit after that, and there I learned how to grow, cook, and share food. I learned about gardening. I always knew about composting, but I learned more so of the process and how to successfully compost and so many more things with like sustainability and being more environmentally friendly and farm-to-table foods while I worked there. So I've been in Nashville ever since, and I've really loved it, and I've loved everything that's to offer here in the city.
Mariah, you mentioned composting. Do you compost at home? If so, how do you compost?
That's a great question. So I'm actually in an apartment now. Before I was in the apartment where I am, I lived in South Nashville, and I guess I'm answering this question with the thoughts that maybe people listening to this are in similar situations as me. So when I was in South Nashville, I was in an apartment with a patio section. Well, no, it was a balcony up top. So there I was able to compost, but being in an urban area, composting poses a lot of difficulty, such as neighbors. You know, they would be like, Mariah's cooking that jackfruit again. I wasn't cooking jackfruit. It was time to turn the compost, so they smelled it. So I had to stop doing it there, and where I live now, I had to stop. You can't compost like outside, but I am a part of a farm, a cohort of a farm, Wonderful People Farm in Nashville. So there they compost, and if I have anything to compost, I could take it there, and there's a lot of options as well. At the kitchen, one of the clients uses Compost Nashville, so it's easy for me to just throw like food waste into that compost. But personally at home, my option for having a compost system isn't there, but there's options such as taking the compost to a farm or to the kitchen. But I do wish that it was possible, like with the neighborhood that I live in now.
Yeah, I definitely understand where the barrier of not having a backyard can pose. And cooking as much as you do, you're probably creating a lot of food scraps.
Yeah, oh, definitely. There's a lot, and I guess this is a part of the conversation as well, with food scraps and with a lot of the demos that I've done with Urban Green Lab, like ways to do other things with those food scraps. It feels like we have a lot of food waste, but there's always a way to keep using that food waste and keep the cycle going. So say we're using cauliflower and celery and onion over here, but I'm also cooking greens. Of course, you can use the food waste from those vegetables to make the broth and then cook the greens. But then, of course, the broth has that leftover food waste. If I don't dehydrate it, then that can go into the compost as well. But I think there's also another layer of, I guess, just like doing our best into, if someone doesn't have access to the compost, at least you made that broth to try to keep that cycle going, like with the food. Like food gives us so much, and you can keep it going and keep it going. You plant it into the soil. Next year, you might surprisingly have tomato. Like, even though you pick the plant, it keeps living and it keeps going. So,
and there's a lot of connection, as we'll keep talking about throughout the episode. There's so much connection between food waste and cooking habits, and there's just a lot to explore there. So I love that you mentioned too the volunteer, quote unquote, volunteer plants that come up in compost. You know, my compost, I think it has a squash, not bloom, but a squash little thing that's growing out of my compost, and an avocado seedling is looking like it's sprouting, which is pretty fun.
That's beautiful.
Which I learned it takes like years for an avocado to fully form.
I know. Maybe I put that avocado pit in there a few years ago, and it's just now
it's possible
showing up. But I want to go back to mention, and we'll include these in the show notes, but so many resources for people to compost. And you mentioned Compost Nashville. I also want to shout out Regenerate, and they provide curbside service as well. Compost Company does, I think they're a little bit more business focused with their collection services, but ways for people to compost using a paid service, and then the Metro convenience centers that are available to all Davidson County residents to be able to drop off food scraps and anything like that.
And so you talked a little bit about like being super mindful about your menu choices and what you choose to cook. So how does sustainability influence your cooking philosophy and menu choices?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with my process and then I'll explain. It sounds a little crazy. So the process for cooking right now is to take whatever I have and create a meal from it. And that came from that nonprofit that I worked at that was surrounded around food justice. They would get like a big donation in of a farmer that might have a bunch of apples that he didn't have another place for it to go. Instead of it going to waste, they would use that. So I think that's still instilled in me to where I'll take what I have. I had someone donate mushrooms to my business for almost 6 months. And if I didn't use those, it was so much mushrooms. I was kind of over mushrooms, but, you know, I love them. People love them. But if I didn't use those mushrooms, they would have went to waste. So we took those mushrooms. We, of course, fried them because I'm a soul food cook. It was so good. Fried them, created meatloaves, created so much broth. I think I still have some of that broth now because it freezes, so you can keep using it. We created so many mushroom dishes. I think like a mushroom steak, everything. So I think that's one aspect is my business is a nonprofit, but it's a little bit of food recovery. So taking what people might not be able to use and then creating a good meal from it. We also, a lot of the mushroom dishes that we made went back into the community through Radical Rabbit has a portion where we give food to different nonprofits around Nashville. So they got a lot of the mushroom dishes as well, and they really loved it. So that was great. But if not that, then if we're supporting local businesses and buying at the farmer's market, they had ramps before, which is a leaf that tastes really garlicky. It tastes like garlic. It's delicious. We made like a pesto from that. And so my process every Monday, I'll just like what's available either at the stores or with something that someone has given me or with the business, what the business can afford as far as produce. We create a menu from that, and then I'll create it in bulk, like if I make a meat for a meatloaf or a lasagna, create it in bulk and just use what's needed so that it's not wasted. Yeah, by the end of the week it trickles down. On Saturday is the farmer's market, and then the next week there might be meals that can use that frozen bulk that I made. And so I think, sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying just kind of use what's available, that's already available in the market, or, I might have to buy additional things to support that meal, but I use what I can and to create different dishes. Yeah.
You had me at mushroom steak.
Oh yeah, lion's mane steak. You probably have you had it before?
No. Lion's mane.
It's really good. You cook it down. You take all the moisture out of it, and then you let it marinate, and then you cook it. It's really good. And having a donation of something like lion's mane, it was a huge thing because lion's mane is not cheap to get. So having that was amazing.
And I heard you say too, or what you were talking about was using the whole food, using the whole ingredient.
Yeah.
There's so much of our ingredients that we're letting go to waste because I think about radishes when I think about this actually, where we're often using the radish, the little pink part that's been underground, but the radish greens are also such a delicious thing to use and incorporate into our dishes. But and even with carrots too, all of those things that have the leafy
Carrot
greens
top.
kind of on top. Yeah. We know this in this room, but there's just so much food that goes to waste. Of course, edible food, but then the scraps are also really important, and thinking about ways to be creative. Once we already have that carrot, can we use all of it?
I think I try to do a small part when I go to the grocery store. I saw Food Inc. It's a documentary. So I try to do a small part in, like, instead of picking the beautiful apples or the beautiful bananas or whatever produce, I'll pick like the ugly ones. So because they're gonna take it by the end of the day and throw it out. So I try to do that small part and use what I can. Even when I buy bananas for personal use, I always buy the brown, but I like the brown bananas better. I think they taste better.
They're sweeter.
Yeah, I use those, and a lot of grocery stores have that little section of food that is about to go bad, or a lot of the international market. Well, Kroger has that little section too. So
They do. Yeah.
I'll try to shop that as well to try to do a little something every day.
That's a good tip. I think I might try that actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's ways that we think about what we want to consume in the grocery store needs to be that perfect apple or the picture perfect kind of ingredient. And I love that you purposefully go for the ones that might not be chosen.
Yeah.
I think my fear is that my children won't eat it if it doesn't look perfect.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But I guess if we cook it before they can even see it,
There you go.
might be a way to trick them into it.
You were talking about bananas too. We did when I used to sell food at the downtown farmers market, and we made. So I freeze a bunch of bananas for smoothies, like for personal use, but we made a banana peel bacon before. It's a thing. Yeah, but banana peels are edible too. I didn't realize a lot of like the skins are actually edible of foods, so people usually just go ahead and discard it, but there's a lot of food you can make from skins of food.
I would have never imagined eating a banana peel.
I didn't realize. Wow. I know. I mean, I don't tend to peel my potatoes when I make something with potatoes or sweet potatoes. I keep the peel on for a similar reason, because I know some people, you might have the preference for it, but it is the whole food.
I just started doing that, actually. Instead of buying like the brown potatoes, or if someone has those potatoes, I'll go for the red, like they're actually cheaper too, the ugly red. I think they call it like A or B. They have like letters for the quality of the potato, and it's really cheap to buy it, and I use the whole potato. It takes a lot less time.
That's true. Yeah, you're not wasting the time.
You're not sitting there peeling. You just boil it, take out, there might be a little bad part. You take out the bad part, but
yeah.
We'll have to keep that in mind for certain holidays coming up.
Oh yeah, it's great for Thanksgiving. And the skin tastes good. It gives you that fiber you need. Yeah.
That's true. This is a very timely episode. We're coming up on a season of a lot of maybe group dinners, whether that's with friends or family. Are there any stories or things that you think about with cooking? I'm thinking about cooking in community and having a lot of people over, and how we can maybe have either some of these conversations over the meal, or any stories that you want to share about bringing people together and kind of low waste cooking.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess this memory comes to mind. I'm not sure why, but I remember eating at someone's house usually every year. This was not an in-law because I'm not married, but something like that in that realm. But at the end, usually you take to-go plates home and you can feed yourself for a couple more days. And I guess some people don't do that. So I always bring in like Tupperware whenever you go. It's very important, But we also do Tupperware whenever we sell food. You get a discount if you bring your own Tupperware, so that we can package it, because compostable packaging is there, but to have something like glass that you put the food in if you're ordering food, I wish that was more popular, I guess, or more well-known, or more allowed, I guess, here. But I guess low waste cooking, when cooking for big crowds, just keep in mind how many people, because a lot of waste comes like after you're done, and even if people don't take food home. And in the restaurant industry, a lot of waste is food that's not eaten, that you might not be able to keep forever. And if a lot of people don't freeze that food, I've seen so many chefs just throw it, just throw it and throw it away like it's nothing, instead of giving it out. But I guess just keeping those numbers in mind, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, there's gonna be like 10 people coming, but they might eat like 5 meals, but they might not, so I just try to keep the numbers low, even preparing for our big Thanksgiving meal. But also just choosing ingredients that won't go bad, so that it won't be wasted, like mashed potatoes are great. Or what we usually do is choose ingredients that are freezable, because if it's freezable, it's savable, especially for people. So they're like, if someone picks up a plate from me at the farmer's market, they're like, what if I don't eat it on Wednesday? I'm like, usually my dishes are always freezable, because sometimes you just don't get to your dish, or sometimes you forget that you have it in your refrigerator. Like, just throw it in the freezer now, and whenever you get ready for it, take it out and put it into the oven.
Yeah, I experienced that around Christmas. We always make this huge pot of gumbo, and to make that roux from scratch every time is a pain. So typically, we'll eat it and then freeze the broth and the roux, and then we can use next time.
Yeah, the freezer is a powerful tool.
It really is. It's and I know a lot of people are like against like the freezer foods and things like that, but if you have a vacuum sealer or just some freezer bags, this save you. For one, I think sustainability is really more economical for people. Like, you're saving money, you're also helping the environment. You're doing a lot for yourself and your family and for other people. I think it's really great. And they even have freezer bags that you can buy on Amazon that aren't made of plastic. You can also just use glass bowls. There's so many options for the freezer, but I love freezing food. Yeah.
I usually save the containers from takeout. I find that if I get broth or something for a takeout meal, I don't know what
like
size that is.
32 ounce.
Yeah.
Like with the
little lid on it.
Yeah, I love those.
And those are great for freezing broth and other random things, and they stack really nicely in the freezer.
They do. too. Yeah. My daughter tried to throw one away. I was like, do not throw that away. We are keeping these. They
You're
work for
reusing it.
everything. Yeah.
That's great. And almost it's related, but to pivot us a little bit to specifically plant-based cooking. Now, I think there's talking about some barriers. We try to talk about barriers, benefits, and motivators to sustainable action. I think barriers come to mind for me with plant-based diets having, I don't know, people have some associations maybe with what it means to eat plant-based or maybe misconceptions or anything. So maybe talk us through what eating plant-based looks like for you and how you could be creative eating plant-based.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. There's also, there's different things with plant-based cooking. I love that you asked this question because some people might not even know what that means.
That's
you
true.
know, plant-based, even though it isn't like the name plant-based, but
You know, back to basics.
Yeah,
Tell
for
us
sure.
what plant-based-
Someone came to my booth and was like, so like, does the jackfruit have the bone in it? Like, no, it's plant. So plant-based cooking is basically using only plants in the food. And another question we usually get is, where do you get your protein from plant-based cooking? Trivia question.
Ooh.
Which plants don't have any protein?
Oh, gosh.
Dun, dun, dun.
You're putting us on the spot.
I do not
Wait,
know.
What plants don't have any protein?
I don't know.
don't even know my categories of plants. This is so embarrassing.
Well, the answer is every plant has protein. So, so the animals are getting their protein from the plant. So plant-based cooking is going straight to the source of protein and just cooking up plants, straight protein. You know, so when you eat plant-based, you're straight up eating plants all the time without the animal byproduct or animals. So. It doesn't include eggs or fish or anything that is an animal or comes from an animal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah. I actually forgot
love
the
that
other
trivia
It gives so much.
question.
It gives so much power to go into the source,
Yeah.
to the actual fruit and vegetable.
And it can be really delicious if it's you know, there's a learning curve of learning how to cook with just plants because the American diet, we're so used to putting animals first, and in plant-based cooking or vegan cooking, you're just using those plants.
It's kind of like unlearning.
Yeah,
Really,
I
it's
guess
going back
so.
to the basics. It feels like
I like that.
you know
yeah.
all of our systems are based around, like, we instantly have that fear, or I have had that fear of, like, yeah, where am I going to get my protein?
Right, yeah.
Because we are taught that, you know, you get protein through meat.
Yeah, for sure. And that, I feel like a nickname for meat is protein, but it should be called like second middleman, protein middleman or something.
Right.
But, yeah. Yeah.
And you said jackfruit.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a trivia question to ask you about jackfruit. I'm hoping you have another trivia question to ask us. If we actually know what jackfruit is.
Yeah,
And
well,
we'd probably get it wrong.
oh, I do have a trivia. Where do you think jackfruit is grown? That's a good one.
A part of the world or where, like,
Or just, okay, maybe
Yeah,
in
more
the
specific.
U.S. or maybe
South America.
Jamaica. Maybe Jamaica. Yeah, so jackfruit is actually grown all around the world, like India, Jamaica. It's a really delicious fruit. You can eat it when it's ripe or when it's not ripe. When it's ripe, I think it tastes like juicy fruit bubblegum, and it's yellow too. I swear I have to look it up, but they might get their flavor from it. It tastes like, you eat it, it's really good. But when you eat it when it's unripe, it just tastes like chicken, like the texture is chicken. And then, so we fry it so that it tastes like a chicken wing, and people eat it. You won't know the difference. It's really delicious, but it's one of those plants that there's so many, like, if you try to, you know, people in America, they eat the same, I'm here too, we eat the same 4 animals, right? Like cow, chicken, whatever.
pig.
Yeah, pig, maybe goat. Naming all the animals, but yeah, the same things. But and there's so many different plants that are. I also just took a foraging class in the forest, and you just learn there's so many plants that we could eat that we just don't. So I guess it does go back to sustainability. With we use a lot of land in America to support the diet of eating the 4 or 5 animals that people that people like, but what if we used all of that land to grow food, grow more vegetables, grow more fruits and veggies? You know, to just think like if you have land that these cows have to graze on, but what if we use that land to grow a whole bunch of, I don't know, a food forest?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fruit and nut trees. It's all interrelated because I think a lot of all of this, if we're talking about plant-based diets or using the whole food or the whole ingredient when we're cooking, it all goes back to the habits that we form and the quote-unquote norms that are set about how we eat and what we eat, and really taking a step back and thinking if there are ways that we can do it differently while also not totally reinventing the wheel. Like, we're not here saying that everyone listening to this podcast needs to start cooking completely differently and going out and picking their greens from their yard. I mean, if you want to do that, great. You know, make sure you know what's edible and what's not.
And so we've been talking about a lot of the benefits of a plant-based diet and cooking. What are some of the barriers or challenges that you've encountered?
I think it's actually the knowledge part of people knowing what it is. So, like, even like the jackfruit, people might not know that it's edible, or what to do with it. And I think that's just with a lot of food that are plant-based. Just in general, we have a shirt actually that says "Talk Vegan to Me," and it's like the words that we say, like Satan. People are like, "What the heck?" You know, you're talking about Satan. Like, it's wheat. It's there's different words that we use like in the vegan community that people might not understand. But I think that's a huge barrier. Like education is also a barrier for people learning how to, I guess, cook more sustainably as well, or to eat more sustainably, which is also, you know, eating plant-based, but there's the education piece is huge. So our focus this year was on education and community. So it was really good to go out and talk to people and show them how to use like the whole jackfruit or the fresh jackfruit. So you can even eat the seeds. And that was something for me to learn. I went to the international market when I bought the jackfruit, and the woman was so kind. She was like, "Oh, you know, you eat the seeds too." I was like, "Oh, really?" She's like, "Yeah, you boil it down and you eat it. It tastes like, what did it taste like? Maybe like a mix of cashew and walnut or something. It was good though." Also, the education piece for me has been really good to learn what other countries are doing, not just us, as far as lower waste cooking. So even learning like the seeds, or I use an ingredient called banana flour. It's the flour on a banana tree. It's purple and it's a little pointy. So we use that in a lot of our foods, but I didn't realize you could eat even like some of the purple parts and make a salad out of it. But that's what people in other countries are doing to survive. You know, they're eating the whole plants. They're not wasting that. And when I was growing up in Knoxville, we did that a lot. I didn't grow up privileged with money, so when we're sitting at the dinner table, like, you finish your food, you don't waste it. My mom, when she's cooking, you know, you don't waste that food, and I think that's a big part of what soul food is anyways. Like, it was born out of sustainability. You know, my ancestors got the food that their masters didn't want. They had to get the food that would have been thrown out, and they had to turn it into a delicious meal. So it's really a privilege for me to be able to take that now in 2024 and be able to do it in a different way, like with the food, but also have that sustainability piece, because it connects back to my ancestors using what they had to make to survive. And even though it's not done out of survival, with me, it's done out of, actually, it is survival, because I have to, my business is survival. I have to eat too, but it's a different form of survival, of course.
I appreciate you sharing your personal story as a way of connecting back to how you find yourself with your business, and thinking too about the way that we all come to sustainable choices differently. It may be, I think we've talked about this in the past with some other guests, it may be motivated by your background. It may be motivated by your current circumstances, what you've realized. We've had a few people who are on and are parents, and it seems like that's maybe more of a present choice for sustainability. Some come from it being motivated throughout their lives. So it's just important that we all approach this differently.
Yeah.
And that's
for sure.
the beauty of it.
Yeah. I think too, it goes back, a barrier for me, I think, is just like knowing how to prepare something. I think like, you know, vegetables or fruits that I didn't grow up with in Michigan and coming down here, something like okra. Okra scared me when I first moved down here. I was like, I don't know how to prepare this. And it seemed like it was so much more readily available. I grew up with corn and everything because we were surrounded by cornfields.
Oh, really?
And so I think a barrier for me was just learning how to prepare it, in that, you know, that common misconception that if it's just plants, it's not going to taste good. Or, you know, my kids seeing vegetables and they're just like, ew, do I have to eat it? And I'm just like, I worked really hard on that. And so I think that can be, you know, a barrier as well.
Something you said a little bit ago makes me wonder, speaking of a barrier, you mentioned that some of us don't know what some of the vegan ingredients are of different, like you mentioned, seitan and jackfruit. Can you give us a rundown of all of those different examples? So if I'm talking to someone on the street, or if I'm talking to my mom or something and I'm trying to explain what all of those different things are.
There's
some of those.
Of course my favorite is jackfruit, and we talked about that one. My second favorite would be like oyster mushrooms. So a lot of mushrooms, I used to say I didn't like mushrooms, and a lot of people say that now, but there are so many different type of mushrooms. It tastes so different. So oyster mushroom is said to taste like oysters, but it tastes really delicious. I don't like my mushrooms like slimy, so I do everything like hard, like I fry it hard. So that's why we call it crispy oyster mushrooms. But there's just different type of mushrooms. So that one tastes like oysters. Lion's mane looks like a brain. It tastes, it feels like a sponge, and I think it tastes more like a sponge.
But in a good way, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
a delicious sponge.
Sorry. The texture is like a sponge, which means it will absorb the flavors of whatever you put in it. Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I'm like, they're eating sponges.
That's funny.
It's going to make people not want to eat
vegan.
Eating stuff that tastes like sponges.
No, but there's so many more mushrooms, but also seitan is, so we do a vegan ribs. We make it out of the seitan and the banana flour. We grill it, smothered in barbecue sauce, and it looks so good and it tastes really good. My philosophy is closed minds don't get fed. So if you have a closed mind, then you're missing out on so much, just so many options. Even if I'm not giving you a mouth-watering description of the foods now, there's a lot of mouth-watering foods that are delicious that you might not have ever put on your plate or thought about putting on your plate.
Talking about barriers again, sometimes I don't know exactly how to use some of those things when we're talking about using the whole ingredient, what some of them taste like once they're cooked. And it does take a lot of experimentation and using or looking at cooking as an art form and allowing for that experiment. Do you have any maybe tips or ways that we can embrace the experimentation in the kitchen?
Yeah, definitely. I think curiosity is always number one. If you're curious and you're willing to experiment and try new things, then that's like the first thing. Some people, like my sister, I have a couple sisters. One of them, she doesn't care for cooking. You know, she's like, but if I cook it, she'll try it. So even if you don't have that curiosity, I think the open mind is another thing. But even things like the carrot tops, or if you're not sure what it is, there's apps that you can use to identify things. There's also, if you go to the farmer's market, you talk to farmers, some of them might be willing to, and I've done this a few times. I've sent plants to them that I might find that I'm not sure if I can eat it. I'll send them a picture of it, and they'll tell me like, oh yeah, that's this, you can eat it. You could do both of those things. But an easy thing that you can make if you're not sure what to make is pesto. I can throw out a quick little pesto recipe, but so this one doesn't include nuts because I just like my pesto to be diverse, so I can use it in pastas or I can use it on top of bread. But an easy low-waste pesto recipe would be, so say you have carrot tops, or what else did I use? Oh, those ramps that I was telling you about, or really any green leaf. Spinach, of course, spinach. I'm not sure what to do with it. I make a pesto, abundance of basil, and abundance of, make a collard green pesto. It's really good. Kale green. any kind of leaf that might go to waste, make a nice pesto. So what do I start off with? You can start off with sunflower seeds, grind those up, and then add lemon juice, garlic, and oil so that it forms not a paste, but like a loose, I'm trying to think of something that looks like this.
Like a puree.
Yeah, puree. That's the word. Yeah, puree. You make a puree. And then you just add in those greens, whatever greens you have, and then you just keep going with the oil, greens, oil, and then it creates that puree, and then you have that texture that you like, and then that pesto can be used if you have some pasta that you need to get rid of that's been sitting in your pantry. Put that on, boil your pasta, put it on your pasta. It can go on bread. I have a loaf of bread right now that's about to go bad, so for lunch I might have that bread with a ton of pesto. And then, of course, that pesto is also protein. You're getting the sunflower seeds and all of those greens that you put in there. You have the fats, which is the oil. You got the garlic, that's good for you. You have so much good things in that, but I think, pesto is always a really good low waste, no waste recipe. You put anything in there.
And as we've established, all plants have protein.
Yeah, they do. All of them.
As we learned.
Tip of the day. So I guess ending on a tip for our listeners. So do you have a tip for home cooks who want to adopt a more sustainable cooking habits?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, we talked about the freezer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's different ways of not wasting food. So freezer method is great. I love it. I stand by it. Another one is dehydrating.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to take, if there's a farm that has an abundance of like carrots, and like, what in the world do I do with all these carrots? Give them to me. I will dehydrate them.
Mm-hmm.
So right now in my pantry, I have a container full of dehydrated pulp. So the pulp from a city juicery, she'll give me her pulp, and then I'll dehydrate it, and then I'll blend it up. So if you don't have a dehydrator, you can also just put it in your oven on the lowest setting, which is usually like 140 or 170 degrees, until it's dry, which might take 8 hours or more. Put it in the blender, dehydrate it. I can add it to my smoothies. I can add it to my ramen. You can add some salt to it and maybe some dried mushroom, and use that as a seasoning for all of your food. So I use my air fryer as a dehydrator as well. So you can freeze things, you can dehydrate things. Of course, you can boil things and make it into a broth or a bouillon or a soup. So you can boil food that might go bad, puree it, maybe add in some coconut milk and a little bit of salt and some other herbs and spices, and then make that into a soup that you can make for your family. You can also put pasta into that and then make that a meal as well. So there's a lot of different things, but that's my main categories for saving food is freezing, dehydrating, and boiling.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. So many fantastic tips.
Yeah.
And so important, of course, as here in Nashville as residents, about a third of what we throw away is food. So it is a big number, and you throw out so many great tips, whatever works for people to try to reduce some of that's coming out of their kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I think we try to talk about here too. It's not about being perfect. It's just about thinking about the one or two things you can try that help make that a little bit better. But we can't thank you enough for the great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah.
We want to make sure listeners know where to find you. Where can they find you?
So we're at @RadicalRabbit_ on Instagram. We're also on Facebook, RadRabNash. We're also at Richland Park Farmers Market every Saturday.
Thank you for listening to Sustainable in the City. Listeners can email sitcnashville@gmail.com to reach us. Episodes are released on the third Tuesday of every month. So until our next episode, go back and check any out that you've missed, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Sustainable in the City. Sustainable in the City is produced by Urban Green Lab and the Nashville Department of Waste Services, a department of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. Recording assistance is provided by the Nashville Public Library's Studio NPL team. Our theme song is produced by Draped Apes. Subscribe in all the places you listen to podcasts. To learn about trash, recycling, and composting services for Nashville residents, visit wasteservices.nashville.gov. For more tips on how to live sustainably, follow Urban Green Lab on social media at Urban Green Lab or online at urbangreenlab.org. Join us next time for more stories about small sustainable actions that are making a big impact on Nashville.